What's going on, guys? Jacob Skeppers here, and today I'm going to talk to you about making weight for powerlifting and why the rapid weight cut is probably not the best method for strength sports and powerlifters, especially with a 2-hour weigh-in. And before we get into the video, I want to discuss the importance of keeping an open mind. In being open-minded, it's allowed me to draw on ideas and theories and principles that work really well in terms of manipulating body composition and diet variables for weight management. And I think the same goes for powerlifting in that it teaches bodybuilders a hell of a lot about the training principles, the importance of periodization, lifting technique, and all of these things. So we always want to be open-minded, and I hope that this video is another example of how we should never show our bias towards one sport or be closed-minded in welcoming new ideas and concepts that could have potential benefits to the practices that we have within our given sport. And the concept I'm going to be discussing today is reverse dieting. And this is something that bodybuilders do, physique enthusiasts, when they're dieting to bring up calorie intake without gaining weight. And I think it's a very useful means of making weight, and I'm going to explain to you guys how to do that. So first, when we discuss making weight for powerlifting, we need to understand that each federation is going to have different requirements. With the IPF, we have a 2-hour weigh-in between the time that weight is taken and the time of competition. In the GPC, we have 24 hours from weigh-in until lifting. And this is extremely important because it determines how much weight can be lost without detriment to performance. So there are typically 3 ways to make weight. And the first is the rapid weight cut. This method is really popular among a lot of powerlifters, and it simply involves manipulating key variables within your diet within a 4 to 7 day window before competition to drastically reduce body weight without detrimenting performance. And we would sit anywhere between 2 to 5% above our competition weight. When we do a rapid weight cut, we are changing glycogen, so we're dropping our carbohydrate intake down, we're water loading and depleting, we are sodium loading and depleting, and potentially bringing calorie intake down, and we may have to sauna or something along those lines the final hours beforehand, and we're likely going to reduce food volume, so that is the amount of food we consume, to eliminate gut residue, and again, all in a bid to drop our total body weight. Then when we weigh in, we refeed and we try to replenish sodium, any potassium changes, water and hydration status, as well as glycogen. Even though we aren't going to be able to replenish glycogen stores with a 2-hour weigh-in, we can definitely do that with the 24-hour weigh-in. But the goal is to refeed so that you're lifting with similar leverages and at a similar weight that you would train at. And while this is a very viable method for cutting weight, there are a number of drawbacks, especially for competitors in federations with a 2-hour weigh-in. Now, there are a couple of drawbacks to the rapid weight cut, which I've experienced with a lot of my lifters and started to notice some trends with many elite level powerlifters when they're cutting down in such an acute time frame. When cutting with a rapid weight loss method, there's obviously a lot of stress and anxiety that comes with it. So you do have to be pretty well experienced with this type of method and have trialed it out in training because you're leaving everything to the last minute. And for a lot of competitors, this causes significant amounts of stress, anxiety, additional pressure. And again, we're worrying and manipulating more variables outside of training that can just make your performance on the day a little more varied and unpredictable. And another drawback of the rapid weight cut is that it can increase the likelihood of binge eating. So when individuals cut in a very short time frame, what I've seen and observed a lot of is competitors blowing out and eating a significant amount of calories once the competition's finished. This can start to reinforce that binge, purge, and yo-yo dieting type behaviors, which again is going to limit your long-term body composition, which is extremely important for being competitive as a powerlifter, and I'll explain that further in a moment. Not only are there some psychological implications, but there are some physiological limitations to the rapid weight cut, and one of those is a potential change in leverages if you don't refeed properly. So if you are training at 5% above your competition weight, for example, and you haven't refed properly, your leverages might be a little different due to having less circumference around your waist, and that could impact your squats, could impact your deadlift to a small degree, and this could cause a reduction in performance on the day. we need to replenish all the systems that we're changing through that rapid weight cut, and hydration is really, really important. So obviously when we do a rapid weight cut, we dehydrate, so we need to rehydrate, and this is very hard to measure. And you haven't rehydrated adequately, you can significantly impair your performance. I've seen cramping in many athletes as a result of this, and again, it's just another issue that we could potentially face if we do a rapid weight cut. However, there are a number of benefits to a rapid weight cut, and that is that it does mean you can train with more available energy and have a positive adaptation to your resistance training throughout the course of your mesocycles and peaking blocks, because you're simply eating at calorie maintenance or a calorie surplus, which is going to allow you to train hard, recover better, and then perform better. And if you are experienced, you can definitely use this to your benefit as a means of making weight and then performing at your best. And for those of you who want to have a better understanding of how to do this, I recommend you watch JP Cauchi's video on the rapid weight cut. I'm going to link that in the description box below for you all to watch. The second way we can make weight is just with a normal cutting phase. That is, you're losing between 0.5 to 1.5% of your body weight over the course of 10 to 16 weeks, and we're going to see some pretty consistent changes towards the weight that you need to make on the day, and that is definitely a viable means of cutting also. This can eliminate the stress and anxiety related to a rapid weight cut, and obviously there are drawbacks to this, because as we get closer to the hardest training cycles, we are not eating sufficient calories, and the adaptations from our resistance training may not have a positive effect on our strength and performance as what they would have if we are eating more food. So if we're spending chronic periods at a calorie deficit, we are going to have less total energy availability. And for females, this is a big issue, because this is what can cause a loss of the menstrual cycle, otherwise known as amenorrhea, as a result of exercise, high intensity exercise, and long periods at a calorie deficit. With a traditional cut, these are issues that we're going to face. We are going to have low energy availability, and strength and performance may suffer in the most important times of your training cycles, those peaking blocks. And I think there's a better way, and that is the reverse diet. And before we talk about reverse dieting, I want to first discuss some context. If you are a beginner, you should likely be competing at the weight that you train at and avoid even considering another weight cut. Adding in more variables and stress is just not going to do you any good, and over the long term, that's when you can start to manipulate your body composition. Again, your federation will dictate whether or not you can perform a rapid weight cut. So if you're in the GPC, then definitely a rapid weight cut could be beneficial. But if you're in the IPF and you've only got 2 hours, you really need to consider whether the juice is worth the squeeze, and you're going to see a benefit in your performance by cutting weight, and you can be more competitive as opposed to cutting down and potentially detrimenting your performance. And the third is, how serious are you as an athlete? If you're somebody who's extremely competitive at a national level and cutting weight is going to allow you to attempt a record, it allows those athletes who are potentially more competitive in a lower weight class and are within striking range of meeting the weight requirements in the class below what they typically would train at, then definitely do this. And this is where I think a rapid weight cut has the most benefit. So what is a reverse diet? So reverse dieting is a concept that bodybuilders have used in relation to a competitive season. Now, it was traditionally used after the show to increase calorie intake without a rapid gain in weight. However, more commonly now, it is used pre-show to increase calorie intake to fill out and peak for competition. Basically, it's the stepwise increase of calorie intake over the course of weeks, and the idea behind it is to increase calorie intake to as high a level as possible, decrease the size of the calorie deficit, and we can actually increase the amount of energy available during the hardest training cycles with minimal weight gain and fat gain. Now, this has a number of benefits in that you get to train at your body weight that you're going to be competing at, as well as you're providing the body with more energy than you would otherwise have been if you were at a larger calorie deficit, meaning that you can synthesize more ATP and just train harder and get better, more positive adaptations from your training. It will reduce the stress and anxiety associated with typical rapid weight cuts, and it will lower the incidence of binge eating post-show, because as I mentioned, by increasing the calorie intake over the course of the final weeks of your training cycles, you're going to be eating more, and that's going to reduce hunger, which will again minimize the chance that you're going to blow out post-competition. Another benefit is by reducing the likelihood of binge eating and allowing you to bring your calorie intake down and then back up, and changing your body composition in a more sustainable manner that focuses on the long term. Consequently, your body composition will improve not just short term, but over the long haul, which is again going to make you a more competitive powerlifter. And more muscle, less fat over the course of years will increase your strength potential, like I mentioned earlier, because at the end of the day, there's only so much skill that you can improve and acquire at 3 lifts. There is going to come a time in your training career where you need to get bigger and get leaner if you want to be competitive. So how to reverse diet? Here are the 4 steps that you need to follow. Step 1, mini cut for 6 to 10 weeks. Set your diet up so that your calorie intake is at a 20 to 30% deficit of your maintenance calories. Keep your protein intake high, around 2 grams per kg. Your fat intake anywhere between 0.8 to 1.2 grams per kg. And let your carbohydrate intake fill up the remaining calories. Aim to lose at a rate of 0.5 to 1.5% of your body weight over the course of this fat loss phase. And again, the rate of loss is going to largely be determined by your starting body fat percentage and your body weight. So if you are somebody who has more body fat, then you can lose at a faster rate, meaning 1.5%, maybe even more. If you're somebody who's already leaner, you might need a shorter duration, and you might only aim to lose 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per week. Cut down until you reach your competition weight, or at least within 1 to 2% of your target weight. Step 2, after the dieting phase, this is when we're going to reverse our calorie intake. Now, if you are 1 to 2% above your target weight, what you need to do is keep dieting. However, we're going to increase the number of calories you consume on a weekly basis by incorporating refeed days. From weeks 6 or 10, whenever you finish your cut, simply introduce 2 to 3 days of maintenance calories, estimating your new maintenance calories minus the adaptations that occur from dieting. What this means is that if you put in your new body weight into a calorie calculator equation, then you might need to eat 10% less than what this number spits out. Because as I mentioned, there are a number of adaptations that take place when we diet that mean a slowdown in our total daily energy expenditure. Because you're still at a deficit for 4 to 5 days during the week, you will continue to lose weight. Now, an important note here, if you are at a 30% deficit during your fat loss phase, you might want to increase your calorie intake on your low days or your fat loss days, bridging the size of the energy deficit. Now, as you can see here, we've increased our total calorie intake. And by doing that, we're increasing available energy. So not only is this going to start to reverse some of the metabolic adaptations that occur during dieting, such as the lethargy, the changes in thyroid, our hormone levels, as well as the hunger, it's also going to allow for more energy to go towards positive adaptations from training. You should continue to lose at a much slower rate now. However, as you lose and once you've reached your target competition weight, this is when you start to introduce more days at maintenance and simply adding a day or 2 depending on where your intake's at. Now, if after the first cut you've made weight, this is when you can increase your calorie intake across the 7-day period to maintenance. Again, this is going to depend on a number of factors such as how long it took to cut weight and how much body weight you lost, but a slow increase in calories, typically 10 to 15% of what you are currently eating, will start to slow down the rate of loss, and that is the goal. We're simply trying to stop the weight loss and maintain our weight. Which brings us to step 3, the most important step. This is where you have to assess and adjust. Whether you've made your weight after the first cut or you're within striking range and you're making those small changes and stepwise increase in calories, what you need to do now is closely monitor what your body weight is doing in response to your current calorie intake. This is where assessing your weight over a 7-day period and taking the averages can be highly beneficial, and monitoring closely your calorie and macronutrient intake to ensure that you can adjust any variables within your diet to bring your weight up or down as desired. Step 4, when you're within 1 to 2 days of competition, you should be only a couple of 100 grams over competition weight or a couple of 100 grams under competition weight. You shouldn't need any drastic adjustments to your diet, and simply monitor where your weight is sitting to assess and adjust your calorie intake. Now, because you've been monitoring your response to the diet over the course of the last few weeks, you can simply look at the trends associated with where your target weight is and adjust your calorie intake either up or down depending on what the data is reading. Making changes should follow the minimum effective dose principle, meaning that we want to manipulate as little variable for as small a change as possible to get the desired result. There is no need to stress or panic and cut your calories drastically. You might simply need to stop drinking water and eating at a certain time in the day, fasting until your weigh-in. Simply reduce your carbohydrate intake in the evening before competition and changing your food volume to ensure that you're not overweight come competition time. Again, if you're underweight, you can simply eat up into the competition and enjoy plenty of food and water. So guys, that is how I recommend you make weight as a powerlifter, because it takes into consideration not just the short-term goals of being competitive at your next competition, but the long-term goal of getting as lean as possible with as much muscle as possible to be as competitive as you can be when you step on the platform. Greg Nuckols wrote a really good article, which I'm going to again link in the description box below, on how the fastest way to increase your competitiveness as a powerlifter is to lose fat mass, provided that you have it to lose. And what this means is competing at the lower end of your body fat settling point. However, getting lean is one thing, but to be really competitive, we need to then fill out our weight class at the best body composition for us as individuals. And again, this would depend on your body fat settling point and what you can tolerate in terms of staying lean and strong. But at the end of the day, more muscle, less fat versus more fat, less muscle at the same weights. One is going to have a greater potential for strength than the other, and we want to be building muscle over the course of time and maintaining a healthy body composition that allows us to excel within powerlifting. I hope you guys found this video informative. If you did, make sure you like it, subscribe to the channel, and if you have questions, comment below and I'll be sure to get to those.